We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The View, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The View. The View is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Hello, friends, and welcome to The View, Voices of Unitarian Universalism, our weekly podcast and broadcast from the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I'm Janine Gelsinger, and joining me today is Reverend Dr. Michael Tino, my buddy. We're co-hosting today, and we have some really amazing guests to bring to you today. The Article 2 Study Commission is here. Woohoo! We're really, really excited to get to ask them some questions, delve into their work, and learn more about who they are as people. But first, let's introduce our host. Like I said, I'm Janine. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, where currently it's in the 70s. It'll get up to 95 today, but we're pretty lucky here in the desert. It's still cooling down at night, so that's always fun. Michael, how are you? Where are you? What's it like where you're at today?
Hi, Janine, and hi, everyone out there in Viewland. I'm the Reverend Dr. Michael Tino. My pronouns are they and them, and I am privileged to be 1/3 of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, the congregation that brings you the View every week, or the VU, as we would call it, if Kiana Dene Perkins were here joining us today. I am here in Peekskill, New York, which is about 35 miles north of New York City, and it is a kind of damp, rainy spring day. We need the moisture here, so it's all good. And things are blooming, and the trees are still trying to kill me, and that's okay. Antihistamines do a marvelous job of warding off the ways in which the trees are attacking my my respiratory system. So it's good to be here. And usually we would at this point give you a little bit of a UU roundup, things that are happening in Unitarian Universalism. But I think our guests are the UU roundup. So Janine, do we have other things that are happening in Unitarian Universalism other than the exciting stuff?
I think, well, the only thing I have to mention is that in Arizona, we have a partnership with our Drag Queen Story Hour Arizona. And so we just announced that we're holding a de-escalation training for UUs to be the joy team in front of the Drag Queen Story Hours across our state. So we're doing some safety training just in case we know exactly what to do to be prepared. And then we're also ready with our rainbow umbrellas to escort all the folks into Drag Queen Story Hour so that they don't have to keep canceling because of protesters. So fun times out here in Arizona, ready to show up and make sure we keep places safe.
Yeah, and cheers for Arizona for showing up again and again and again. I know, even before like GA was there, what's that, 11 years ago now? Arizona was a hot spot for the ways in which we needed to show up. And I noted with joy, as I know you did too, because you shared it on Facebook, that there's a map of places where anti-trans bills are coming up and where they're likely to come up in the next couple of years. And Arizona was one of the states where it's really unlikely that anti-trans bills will be enacted in the next couple of years. That's all because people have been showing up.
Yes, that's exactly right. We've defeated the anti-trans bills for the last 4 years in a row in a time when we had a completely red Senate, House, and governor. And now we have a veto. We worked really, really hard to on coalitions. That's the only way to organize. We had a statewide coalition fighting the legislature with 22 organizations. UU Jazz was the only faith-based organization in there. And we showed up and sat down with our legislators and got the bills killed in committee by GOP legislators every single year. And that happened because a lot of folks were willing to have those tough conversations. So yeah, we're pretty proud in the ways that Arizona shows up. Unfortunately, we have a very strong movement in Arizona, which is a great thing. And we've had to form that unit because, like you mentioned, we've had some really terrible stuff in Arizona. So resistance is sometimes born out of pretty terrible situations, but we've learned how to fight back. And
the situations are really terrible in lots of places for lots of people right now. And so to our beloveds out there in Florida and Tennessee and Oklahoma and Kentucky and all the places where people are being attacked daily for who you are, just know that resistance is possible.
It's possible. And right now, a lot of our coalition partners are working with Oklahoma and Florida and Texas and Tennessee and all the places that need our support and strategy as well.
So it's worth it to celebrate moments when the resistance pokes through, right? So
yeah. Well, should we get to our guests today?
Let's please. Yes.
Fantastic. So the Article 2 Study Commission almost needs no introduction, but I think today I would love for each of the commissioners that were able to join us today to introduce themselves and say a little bit about who you are as people. I think it's always important to point out that in our democratic process as UUs, regular people, regular UUs, although I don't know, y'all are pretty exceptional, but regular UUs are making these decisions and committing themselves unpaid for a
dedicated
very
volunteers
long volunteer job in order to serve our faith in such transformative ways. So Cheryl M. Walker, would you like to start us off in introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm the Reverend Cheryl M. Walker. My pronouns are Cheryl, she, and they. I am here in not so sunny Philadelphia. It is not always sunny in Philadelphia. In fact, it's rather gray and overcast, and it's a little bit chilly today, but that's okay. We had a nice run of warm weather a couple of weeks ago. And yes, Michael, the trees are trying to kill me too. I feel you. And I currently serve as the interim minister at the Unitarian Society of Germantown. How about you, Rob?
Sure, thanks. My name's Rob Spurko. I'm coming to y'all from East Tennessee. So Tennessee, thanks you, Arizona, et cetera, for the inspiration. But yeah, I'm a member at Foothills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Maryville, Tennessee, which is just south of Knoxville. Not too far from, the holy land of Dollywood and all those environs.
I'm wearing a Dolly Parton T-shirt under this shirt, Rob.
I knew I liked you, Michael. I knew I liked you. But yeah, I'm trying. A little more about myself, I guess. I teach at the University of Tennessee. Play Dungeons and Dragons in my spare time. So I guess that technically I'm used to imagining other worlds, so that maybe fit me well for this work. Yeah. It is 60 degrees, cool and rainy here. To give you a sense of the vibe. The trees are not trying to kill me, but they are reminding me that there's a presence here. It's a nice respiratory system. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it, that sort of thing. And I'll invite Maya.
Hi, I'm Maya Waller. I am from Rochester, New York, and a member at the First Unitarian Church of Rochester, but I am currently in Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia, where it is cloudy, cool, and the trees have been attacking everyone this year. And I am currently about to wrap up my second year at college and return to Rochester for the summer. So I'm one of the youth young adult members on the commission. Paula.
Thank you, Maya. And hello, everyone. I am Paula Cole Jones. I use she, her pronouns. I am in Washington, D.C., where I've been a lifelong member of All Souls Church. And I guess for about the past 23 years or so, I have worked with Unitarian Universalist congregations around the country. That's a long time. I have a plant science background. I feel like I need to defend the trees. They are not attacking us. They're making sure that we have fruits and nuts for the rest of the season. So anyway, it's a joy to be here and to see you all. Thank you. Oh, my weather? I'm sorry. We've been holding in the mid 60s for the past week. So it's either nice or cool, depending on whether or not we have sun or clouds.
Hi, I'm Kathy Burek, and I'm a member of your UUA Board of Trustees, and along with Meg Riley, our co-moderator, one of the two board liaisons to the Article 2 Study Commission. I am a member of the Michael Savitas Unitarian Society, which is in Fridley, Minnesota, which is a northern suburb of Minneapolis. And anyone that knows the Twin Cities knows that in April, the weather can be anything, just wait and it'll change. 2 weeks ago, it was in the upper 80s. This weekend, it's going to be in the 40s again, and they're talking about some possible snowflakes mixed in with the rain. So our trees aren't at the point where they're doing much of anything yet, because every time they think it's time to start budding out, the weather gets cold and they go, oh, maybe not now. Our part of the country was and is inhabited by the Dakota and the Anishinaabe people. And I'm proud to say that Minnesota is going in the exact opposite direction of the surrounding states. We have affirmed that we are a safe haven for trans people. We've affirmed gender affirming care. We're expanding voting rights. We've affirmed reproductive choice. And there are a dozen UU congregations in the Twin Cities here of all sizes and mixes of philosophy and theology another dozen in greater Minnesota. So if they're not treating you right in your state, you're welcome here. We would love to have you.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you, Paula, for defending the trees. We're sex positive here on The View, and the trees are doing their reproductive dance, although it does affect our allergies. So I wonder if we could start with just in case some of our viewers, our CLF viewers, many are religious professionals. The Article 2 Study Commission has been around for quite some time, but would one of you just give kind of a brief, what is Article 2, and then we'll jump into some of our juicier questions.
Sure, I'll jump in.
Go for it.
Article 2 of the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregation is called now Purposes and Principles. So most people think of it as the place where the principles live and the principles and sources live, but it has more than that. It also has a statement of purpose for the UUA itself. I mean, every organization by law has to say, what's your purpose? It also has an inclusion clause, which we recently adopted, and it has a freedom of belief clause. We were charged by the board to look at all of Article 2 and not just the principles, not just the sources, but all of Article 2. And what we found was a kind of, it was somewhat disjointed. So one of our goals in this was to have a more holistic, cohesive statement to putting all of these things together. That's Article 2 in a nutshell, and as few words that I could possibly tell you.
I love it. Nutshell size is perfect for us. So let's get into some juicier questions. So as members of this Article 2 Study Commission, you've been charged with examining Article 2 and you've worked on it since 2020. You got the charge, right? Is that right? So what have you learned individually? What have you learned about Unitarian Universalism, yourselves, each other? Let's start with Paula, if she doesn't mind.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. It's been really interesting because we were given a big charge and a lot of latitude, and we've tried to embrace as much of Unitarian Universalism as we can in this time. We've talked to a lot of people, and I think that some of the most meaningful insights for me have been the kinds of things that made people connect with Unitarian Universalism. Like, for example, singing in the church choir, right? Where people found their connection through the lyrics of the hymns and through that ongoing connection. We've talked with people who have different theological or faith backgrounds, who are Unitarian Universalists now, and then to hear again why they've connected and the commonalities that we share. We've also learned how challenging it can be to ask people to make change. We get comfortable and accustomed to our current understandings. And while we're trying to look forward, some of those things may need to be changed, and it can be challenging for a system to change. So those are, I also think for me in particular, taking a closer look at the history. And I am currently reading the 1819 sermon that was given by William Ellery Channing in Baltimore, it's just a whole fascinating episode. But this has turned me on more to the history of Unitarian Universalism as well.
Well, and Paula, it's fascinating that you bring up Channing. because in that sermon, he was trying to define Unitarian Christianity, right? Particularly Unitarian Christianity. But it points to, I think, a long history, a centuries long history of the ways in which we Unitarians, Universalists, and Unitarian Universalists have engaged in conversation, discussion, debate, argument about what's at the core of our faith and what it is that our purpose is. And so you're carrying on that tradition in a really meaningful way by asking people to think about what is at the core of Unitarian Universalism. And I'm glad that you've connected it
Yeah,
for people.
I think
Yeah.
we're actually at another real important defining point, and that period where Channing preached that sermon, they were defining Unitarianism, Unitarian Christianity. And we're at a defining point too about the future of Unitarian Universalism as this much more inclusive, from a much more inclusive perspective. So I am drawing connections between this moment and that moment. Yeah, thank you, Michael.
What else?
I
What else? Have you
I
learned?
often think that, if Channing showed up in one of our congregations today, he'd say, "What did you do to my faith?" Because we have changed so much over that time. I mean, the one thing that is constant within Unitarian Universalism is transformation and evolution.
Well, and that was, they defined that, and that, over 200 years ago. It was spoken in such a way that what is happening in the wider society also shapes us as a faith community. So yeah, it's interesting to see how much of it is still very much in play.
I want to bring other folks in here too. For those of you who are regular viewers, you might notice that something's a little different this week. And it's because our normal system that we use to broadcast the view can't fit this many people. So we're back on Zoom this week with 8 people or 9 people or however many people we've got this week, and we're really glad. And so Rob.
Yeah, no, I would just, going back to what Cheryl and Paula was saying. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been interesting engaging, with the history, right, and with sort of seeing how, because we've had the current Article 2 basically for 37 years, we have gotten very used to it. And it sort of seems natural. It seems comfortable. And going back to times when that wasn't, when we were having, like you said, arguments about it, debates, 1961 when the merger happened, that was really contentious. It was fascinating to read some of the histories and stuff, where they're, up at 2 a.m. in the hotel room trying to hash out the language that will get both groups on board. There ought to be, it would be a very small demographic, but you could make a movie, honestly, get the right directors and actors in there. But, because it's that larger panel, who are we? Who do we need to be? Who are we, in this moment? Who have we come from, right? And when you have, I'm kind of a James Luther Adams fan, and this has not done anything to dissuade me, this work, but when he's talking about prophecy, right, and that really what he saw was a need for people to come together, right? For Adams, it's not like the lone Jeremiah up in front, whatever. It's people coming together to talk about the changes that they're going through and how to take charge of those, or how to be active in those, maybe, rather than getting kicked around by history, right? And, Jenny, you mentioned Arizona earlier, right? I mean, that's an example, right? Tennessee right now. I mean, I'm from Tennessee, raised here, Appalachian kind of all the way through, and to have Justin Jones and Justin Pearson and Gloria Johnson, right, as figures, right, who were doing this work, and Justin Pearson giving the sermon in Church of the River in Memphis, right, on Easter Sunday, but talking about, where we've come from, but what do we need to be now? Right, where do we need to be now? Right, and this issue of gun violence had been in the front, but I was just seeing a clip from a little while ago where Justin Pearson was taking on another legislator about the anti-trans laws, for instance. Right, for Pearson, it all connects. And we're in a real particular historical moment here. Right, and so for me, getting to think about how we can bring this faith that I love into a new level of energy, maybe. I see this as maybe opening a lot of creativity, and to do it with the group that I've been able to do it with. I'm a big fan of everybody else on the commission. So
I guess I can jump in. I think my learning as a youth and then young adult member, my learnings and my relationship to Unitarian Universalism was less rooted historically, and I came in, and I just learned a lot about this faith and all of the history and all everything that I learned. There was a very intense learning curve. But I've also learned I've learned more about the capacity of this faith, and really like what Rob was talking about, like how Unitarian Universalism can be moving forward and how it can respond to the demands of now. And I'm really grateful that there was intentionally on our commission, there were two youth and then young adult members explicitly to uplift that perspective and think about, like, we're the people who will be inheriting this faith and moving it forward. And so I learned a lot about the inner workings of Unitarian Universalism, as well as the capacity and how, like, what this faith really can do and can be, and how I want to show up in that. And I learned a lot from all of the commission members. They're amazing, great people who I'm so lucky to have met, and it's crazy that I just met all of them 3 years ago. And I've only seen them a few times in person, but really it's like we're all really cool people. So it's been a lot of personal, but also learning about how to move forward and what we can do as community.
One thing go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I've certainly appreciated Maya's and Satya's presence on the commission. I wish people could really see what our youth are bringing to this faith. The depth of understanding, articulation of what's important, the ability to grow. And I see this in our own congregation every year that we have a coming of age group. The credo statements coming out of high school students are so much more profound than I think I could have done at that age. I mean, I was Episcopalian, so you recited the Apostles' Creed and you were done with it. And so I think that I would really encourage people to pay attention to what the youth and young adults in their congregation are here for, because they really have a deeper understanding, having grown up with this, and also because they're struggling with our current reality in a way that a lot of us aren't anymore. I think back to when I joined my congregation in 1979, coming through the 60s, 50s, into the 70s, the intellectualism, the individualism was what really appealed. And over time, I've come to appreciate the other part of our faith tradition, the covenantal side, the side that says we have responsibilities, the side that says relationships are important, that community is important, that love is important. And so I think that if we are going to be a living tradition, we have to be able to do that kind of growth and understand that the core of who we are as Unitarian Universalists is one thing, but how it needs to play out at a given moment in history and looking forward to the future is something entirely different.
Absolutely. You know, I was going to ask as well. So for context, I'm not a minister. I've never been to seminary, and I've only been a UU since 2015. And so when I joined as a member, as a Unitarian Universalist for the first time, I saw the 7 principles at the time written on the back of my order of service. And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, I like this. I believe this. And that was kind of the major extent of my adult faith development. And for folks like me who joined Unitarian Universalism as adults and didn't go to seminary, you know, our lay folks, Pew Research says only 11% of UUs are raised UU. And so really my faith formation happened the most in youth and young adult spaces because I volunteered to teach OWL, and I volunteered to work with the preschoolers, and I volunteered to be a youth advisor in the YRUU groups. And so when I've spoken to congregations and encounter some resistance around changing the principles, a lot of times for me, it comes back to faith formation. And, you know, if the only thing that we offer people to agree upon to become UUs is the 7 principles, then it makes sense that some people have a little bit of attachment to them because that's all they were really offered. I wonder if any of you want to speak a little bit to what this process has been like as far as faith formation.
I mean, I think Maya probably got something interesting to say about this, but I do want to note something you just said, which I think is interesting. Technically, nobody has to agree to the principles to be a UU, right? You know, that's one of the other things, you know, kind of learnings is, you know, I just sort of assumed, you know, they're an agreement, but the Article 2 is an agreement between congregations, right? Congregations agree to promote these ideas. And so, you know, we have taken them as individual. I mean, they're good principles, right, to use as an individual code of ethics and stuff. You know, but that's kind of an interesting use that not every faith uses their bylaws in their hymnal and, you know, in the orders of service, right? We're a little weird in that way, you know, and so we use them, you know, in public speaking, right? In advocating in public, we use the, you know, the principles and things. And so like as we move toward the sort of values and covenant model, right, you know, we're having to think on the one hand on the sort of UUA level, congregations, you know, agreeing to these things, you know, but then how do you use them, like you're saying, in faith formation? How do you use those individually? And we hope that it sort of works on these levels too, right, our proposal. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of note that in this process is that, you know, when you take a step back, like we have sort of done and look from the balcony on that, it's weird, you know, what we are expecting our bylaws to do for us, but it's the only thing we sort of, like you're saying, vote on together, right? I mean, it does have that, you know, ultimately that democratic approval, right? And so you can see how it got treated this way. But anyway.
Well, and Paula, you led an entire faith formation process in a grassroots effort around the 8th Principle Project and adopting the 8th Principle, right? I mean, I don't know. I think you see that as faith formation, right? I see that as faith formation, the way that congregations had to really delve in and examine how they express their values as a congregation, and then choose to adopt a new expression of especially their anti-racism commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still growing. I met with 2 groups of people just this week. The conversations that people have been having are so exciting. Rob, you talked about the creativity and the energy. People are revisioning Unitarian Universalism for our times. So the principles, you know, 37, 38 years ago, those principles were adopted, and they have served us extremely well. But now people are revisioning Unitarian Universalism, 3, almost 4 decades later. A whole generation has come of age, and it has been faith formation. the work of the eighth principle and Article 2, I think probably for all of us, it has deepened our appreciation, commitment to Unitarian Universalism. I am a big believer in having the bird's eye view, and so seeing the future and what is possible if we are working collectively in the covenantal community to move forward in terms of what is relevant in today's time. That will change us, who we are as a faith, as it should. Yeah, thank you, Janine, for recognizing that.
Yeah, amen. Thank you for all that work.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, you know, we didn't come up with the values. I mean, we didn't sit in a room and say, what are the values? We asked, and we got what we did was just synthesize lots and lots and lots of different answers into what are our shared values. And so I think it's two important points is that these are our shared values. They are not necessarily, some of your personal values aren't on that list. But these are the ones over and over and over again from Unitarian Universalists we heard that we shared using one word or another. And what it was up to us was to pick the word that we were going to use to represent this idea that you could have said in 25 different ways, and in fact did say in 35 different ways. And it's just like, well, let's use this one word. And so they're not our values. They are our values. And what was really interesting about that is that we started getting the same answers over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And at first it was a little frustrating. Everybody's saying the same thing. And I went, of course they should be saying the same thing.
It's a good
That's
thing.
how we know their shared values. It was a good thing. Yeah.
And in some ways, who's
go ahead,
talking?
Michael.
DC, go ahead.
I'm fascinated. I too came to Unitarian Universalism as an adult. And I think at some point we ought to have a conversation about how and why we are a denomination of refugees and what that sort of historic religious trauma does to how we operate as a system. Because I think that that happens. And I'm thinking about like the first time I went to GA and I watched the debate over punctuation. And I thought, what in the hell? See, my first exposure to Unitarian Universalism was through the queer rights movement in Maine. And in my mind, I had sort of pigeonholed UUs as the people of the clipboard. Right? These were the people who had a list of shit to do and a clipboard, and they were doing it, you know? And
I'm just picturing Moses with two clipboards coming down from the mountain. Sorry.
But it was the first time that I saw people actually, this is my church, this is what we do, this is how we act our values. And then I got to GA and I thought, the English professors have taken over. And boy, how did we like words. And there's Channing did some amazing things, good and bad. He inspired so much thought at the cost of feeling and experience and embodied spiritual experience. William Ellery Channing did so much cool stuff, and I look at him as one of the primary reasons why so many UUs experience spiritual and religious practice from the neck up.
Mm. I think that's so important to talk about. Yeah.
And we really like to play with words. And I think part of why we do that is to avoid feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And avoid the vulnerable feelings that come when we have to hold on to something and claim it and have other people critique it or not like it in some way. So words are an easy thing, or an easy refuge in times of emotional pain.
Yeah, I mean, disconnection from your body is a trauma response, a coping response, right? And so if you're feeling like being embodied in your spiritual practice is threatening to you in some way, then it makes sense to click into your head only. And I think because we are a faith tradition that attracts like logic and reason loving people sometimes, we tend to have more than our fair share. And then also, as you mentioned, DC, our legacy of being folks who've experienced religious trauma and we're looking for something different, right? You know, there's a fair amount of that. But I want to say one of the ways that I've really loved bringing Article 2's proposed new language into congregations is I've been able to visit some of the congregations in Arizona and preach with them. And we've been using the Article 2 language as a Lectio Divina practice and having everyone really like breathe into, you know, we do like a centering meditation moment first, have everyone kind of breathe into it, close their eyes if that feels comfortable, and then kind of go back and forth reading the language out loud and encouraging folks to just experience how it feels in their body to hear the language and have it wash over them. We took away all their handouts and their highlighters and their red pens because that was kind of the instinct. And we were like, no, put that away. We are a faith tradition. Let's experience these words as expressing our spirituality and our values, and not as an editing exercise.
Right. You know, absolutely. And I will say, as an English professor, you know, like Paula wanted to defend the trees, you know, some of us teach poetry and all that sort of stuff. You know, part of our charge was to make it poetic. And man, that is, you know, try and take your bylaws and make them poetic, you know, but it makes me think, and this is what I wanted to get to, is, you know, one of the people involved in setting up the commission was Alandria Williams. And I just feel like, as someone, a fellow East Tennessee UU, I want to lift them up again in their spirit into this space, because, you know, he was always about the body, embodiment, right? And that's one of the things, you know, like when we put love at the center, right? People keep asking, well, what's the definition of love you're using? And, you know, my definition is kind of, well, the kind of love you see refracted through those other values, right? You know, but also I think people are uncomfortable because, like you're saying, love is, you know, on one hand, very spiritual. It's a spiritual principle. It's an active verb, all that sort of stuff. But it also does tie in different ways to embodiment. Right. You know, and I think, you know, we shouldn't shy away from that, you know, is that getting down to the, you know, when I teach writing, right, you know, we talk about emotional appeals, and it's not just, you know, talking about feeling, but we get emotional over things that touch our values, right? Like if you value the family, right? That's why family values get used rhetorically, is because people have an emotional attachment to that, right? You know, safety even kind of underneath that somehow. You know, and so on the one hand, you know, when I joined Tennessee Valley UU Church in Knoxville in 2003, you know, and one of the hospitals was called the Baptist Recovery Center. And the joke was that was also the UU Church in Knoxville, the Baptist Recovery Center. You know, but you know, the other thing I want to say is, and I don't want to put Maya on the spot too much, but, you know, thinking about younger people, a lot of times they're not growing up with this kind of religious trauma in the same way, especially people who have come up through UU. But I think even more, you know, I teach, you know, first year students all the time, right? And as society is shifting, right? There are not as many people being raised in faith traditions, and they don't come as refugees to the same. I think that is something generationally we need to think about. And I just wondered if Maya wanted to say anything, sort of towards that. I'd be, curious.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I basically grew up in the church. I joined when I was, I don't know, like 7. But I think I don't know, but I think I have the same like desire to feel because I don't have that religious trauma, but the outside world is just as like I think it might be coming from a different place. And in the same way, Unitarian Universalist spaces are like kind of recovery spaces. And I know that I have definitely wanted the language to be able to recognize our values, but then also what that means we do. And like both how to feel and how to be in that, but also how to move in that and how to do something. And so we actually did focus a lot on verbs and adding verbs back into the language, which I think was really helpful in just that. I don't know if that exactly answers it, but I think I don't know. Yeah, like youth definitely don't have that same journey of getting there, but I think this purpose of Unitarian Universalism and the role that it can play is very similar. And I think that our focus on shared values and verbs is a step in that direction of really returning to the feeling of and the embodiment of our faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we talk about UU congregations as recovery spaces, not only are we leaving out youth and some folks who don't necessarily have religious trauma to recovery from, but we also leave out how folks are often experiencing trauma within our own faith tradition of Unitarian Universalism, right? I mean, like, yes, we can be sources of refuge for folks that experience religious trauma elsewhere, but I have a similar story to DC. When I first went to GA for the first time, I joined, my very first UU congregation was UU Congregation of Phoenix, and Susan Frederick Gray was my minister. My first UU minister, and also my first boss as a religious professional when I later took on a religious professional role. And so that's all that I thought UUism was, just this one church with Susan up there preaching Black Lives Matter and then showing up in the streets to do the things that she said. And that was my entire experience of Unitarian Universalism. And the first time I went to GA, and the procedural mic nearly killed me. Like I nearly left the faith. To see all the people who wanted to get up there and haggle over punctuation, like DC mentioned, I was like, get me out of here. What is this? This is not what I signed up for. And so I think, you know, when we have young folks that served on this commission that says, this is how we express our values, this is the kind of Unitarian Universalism that we want to take forward into the future and how we want to express that, we have to be real careful to wordsmith it to death, because what kind of message is that sending folks that are on the younger end that want to live into these values as the future of our faith? Paula, you had something to bring here too.
Yeah, and you all have partly covered it, but we, the commissioners, feel like the proposed changes are a greater embodiment of Unitarian Universalism. So we're talking about moving from, you know, the head and how the principles might be held to people to, you know, we covenant. Because we value these things, therefore we covenant. to do something about it. Once we had written our first proposal back in October, I had an opportunity within a matter of days of being with our professional religious educators at their conference. Tanner was there as well. And because our proposal wasn't public, I sat down one-on-one with at least 25 people and had them read the new proposed values and covenant. And I'm going to tell you what I saw in terms of the emotional connection that people were making. Some people had tears as they read it. I could hear and feel the sighs as they were reading it. It moved people. And so that embodiment, we had a test, an early test of it, and our proposed changes will take us someplace different if we give them a chance.
Going back to the wordsmithing notion, I think that stems very much from the sort of individualist, almost a libertarian view of our faith. And we're not libertarian, we're liberal. And the difference is that the libertarian notion was all about autonomous individuals in autonomous congregations, and nobody can tell us what to do. And so we're going to really wordsmith and punctuate the heck out of any resolution on the floor, because heaven forbid somebody should try to suggest that a different interpretation than the one I want, because it's all about me. And it strikes me that so many of the negative comments that we're getting and negative reactions to the changes in Article 2 are fear-based, and it entirely neglects the strength of our universalist heritage, which was all about hope. Give them not hell, but hope. And I really feel that what the current proposal is doing is it's giving hope. It's saying we have some core values and we're committing ourselves to working together to advance these, even though we may have entirely different notions about what those mean. And even though we may not define love in the same way, in heavens, how much more wordsmithy can you get than asking for a definition of love?
As a universalist, I appreciate I appreciate that entirely. And I want to say that I've read the proposal you put out. I've engaged with it. I've engaged with the whole process. I gave feedback at the appropriate times. And when I read your proposal for the first time, I fell in love with it in a certain way. I thought I felt it. And I thought, boy, howdy, if this passes exactly the way it is, I'll be happy. And I'm not so naive to think that that's actually what's going to happen. And so there's a process, because, where you did this beautiful embodied magical work, and now it has to go through processes, because we also we value the head, even if it shouldn't be our whole faith, and we value the process. And so I'm hoping we have only a few minutes left to go. If someone can say where we are in the process and what's happening right now, so that our viewers out there can continue to engage in appropriate ways as we're moving forward. And I don't know who wants to take that. Just start talking and we'll get you on the screen.
I could, and y'all can jump in as you need to correct me. But yeah, so there's a form, and I think maybe y'all can put that in the chat in the various media. That's open until Sunday, April 30th, for people to submit
So just
amendment
a few more
ideas.
days.
Yeah, so get on that. And it's ideal. Part of the one of the things the form asks is, have you talked about this with your congregation or with other people? Right, just we want people to workshop it around. And what all those suggestions are going to do is get reshaped, ideally, into some amendments. Right, there are going to be several workshops in May that the board is facilitating to try and streamline things. right? So that, we can do a lot of work before General Assembly because there's only so much time in the actual sessions, to do this. How much can we do ahead of time to get people on the same page, to clarify what we really, want to suggest about this or that section? And so that, those can get shaped, those can get sent back out to congregations so they can see them ahead of GA and the delegates can see them ahead of GA. Right. And then there's still going to be some room at GA for more proposals or more amendments, but, we're just not going to be able to consider those as deeply, honestly, right? This is a way to try and have some time to talk and consider them deeply in May at these workshops so that whatever changes might be, important or necessary or preferable or whatever, can get talked about and voted on at General Assembly. And then we can vote on the whole proposal as amended, toward the end of General Assembly. I think that covers most of the process going forward here.
Thank you so much. And so just to be clear, there's an open period where people can submit suggestions, and then those suggestions will be discussed in workshops in May. And at General Assembly, there will be less time for discussion because it is not an appropriate place to have those in-depth discussions on the floor of the, what do they call them now, general sessions. It used to be plenaries, but on the floor of the general session is not the time or the place to have those in-depth discussions. So have them now, and we will be asked to vote on a proposal that is presumably amended from what you all put forward. And if that proposal gets, correct me if I'm wrong, a majority vote at GA this year?
Yep, simple majority, 51%.
It goes back to the commission for a year's worth of work. Is that right?
Well, it doesn't go back to us.
Well,
I mean,
if
it does.
I could.
Oh, go ahead, Kathy. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could, the way the bylaws are structured, any amendments that are adopted by this General Assembly go back to the commission, and they have 6 months in order to incorporate those amendments into the draft. So their due date would actually be Christmas Eve of 2023. Enjoy your holiday. And at that point, then the board puts them on the agenda for the 2024 GA.
Yeah, you'd think I might have been on the board when we actually passed the
you
new
might have
Article
been,
15.
Michael, yes. And amendments can still be offered through 2024. The board can put some on, or else I think we have, I forget the exact number of congregations that could, by petition, move to put other amendments on for the 2024 GA that even weren't considered in 2023. About this interim period in May, what the board is hoping for is that the people who are interested in similar categories of amendments would get themselves together and agree on common language. So for example, a pretty significant number of amendments are relating to adding back some parts of the principles or all of the principles or parts of the sources or all of the sources. And so rather than dozens of different variations on that theme, we're hoping people will get themselves together by meeting up in these workshops and by using the discuss.org function on the UUA website to be able to agree. And let's just have one amendment about the principles, one amendment about sources, and so on, so that we're able to appropriately get the meaty issues people are concerned about onto the floor without having to really go through all of the dozens. Well, we have 290 going on 300 different submissions and comments to this point, and I'm sure we'll get a lot more over the weekend.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate the clarity. We have about a minute left. And so in a minute, I'm hoping we can get everyone on the screen. I'm preaching about this proposal in a couple of weeks. What's one thing that each of you hopes that I say in my sermon?
I hope you say it's the beginning of a process. The beginning of a process and not the end. Like, in other words,
It's kind of the middle of the process.
Well, yeah, but what I want to see is like people to vote yes this year, to give us a year to live with it, to live into it, to really embody it, to try it out for a year, to really know whether it works or not. I think it does, but we're just kind of presuming at this point, we're projecting, right? Let's try it for a year, and then it has to make that bigger vote next year. So that's the one thing I would want to, kind of make sure is emphasized.
Good message. I think it's important that people see this as about the vibrancy of Unitarian Universalism going forward. This is a vision about our future.
I think it would be great if you reiterated how like how you like it and you like the embodiment that you felt, and just encourage people to sit with it and feel it.
Kathy, you're muted.
And I would certainly encourage people to, as Cheryl had recommended, and as we were recommending at the early stages of our work, how does it feel? And then what do you think? And then maybe what might you want to change? But really experience it deeply before you just start getting into the punctuation and the I like this word rather than some other word.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. And Janine, I might try your Lectio Divina approach. I love, let's experience this as a sacred document for a minute and see how that feels to us.
Amen. Well, let us know how it goes. Thank you all so much for being with us today, and not only for being here on The View with us, but for this sacred work that you're doing on behalf of our faith tradition. This is one of the most inspiring things that I've seen happen since I've been in UU. So I'm so grateful to you all for digging into this faith formational work and pointing us towards the future of our faith. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.